The young man served as a remarkable soldier, carrying out his duties under the leadership of the Republic. He belonged to an elite unit of soldiers that most people referred to as the Ghosts. Soldiers and terrorist groups across the globe regard this group with deep fear and respect. They had earned their reputation as the top special forces unit for good reason. Among this remarkable group stands one young man who stands out even more than the rest. His name is George. He resembled a walking weapon built for battle. He calculated strategies on the battlefield with the precision and speed of someone swiftly moving beads on an abacus. Merely hearing his name sent a chill of fear through anyone who heard it. He had earned a nickname that matched his intense character. People called him Mr. War. His daring actions brought him both loyal followers and dangerous foes. His life is threatened by adversaries who wish to see him dead. In the end, his life came to a heartbreaking conclusion when a bullet claimed him. Despite all the praise that had been given to him, it was not just empty flattery. No adversary had ever existed who could defeat a formidable fighter like him. He had been deceived by those he had once trusted as allies. He completed a certain mission with remarkable skill, defeating the whole opposing group faster than anyone had before. Captain Beck, driven by his insatiable desire for the spotlight, found himself bristling with jealousy at the situation. In the end, the unfortunate man lost his life in a ruthless and heartless manner. Despite being on the brink of death, he struggled to accept the harsh reality that someone had turned against him. A vision of a certain woman named suddenly appeared in his thoughts. Just before his thoughts faded into nothingness, his consciousness slipped away. He snapped his eyes open and was met with the horrifying sight of a decaying corpse looming over him, intent on an unthinkable act. He shoved the lifeless body away, only to realize he was surrounded on all sides by a heap of other corpses. All of the bodies had been piled into a garbage truck that was. There was no hesitation, as everything was swiftly tossed over the edge of the cliff. As bodies plummeted into the river below, George caught hold of the cliff's edge, narrowly escaping death. He scrambled upward with swift movements, having come dangerously close to losing their life. He found himself overwhelmed by the sight of so many bodies being discarded at once. The men responsible for disposing of the decaying bodies acted with a calm indifference, as though discarding countless rotting corpses was nothing more than a regular part of their daily lives. They felt satisfied knowing they had given the fish in Tokyo Bay a little more to eat than usual. The topic shifted to Tokyo. The boy appeared to have awakened somewhere in Japan. He found himself standing in a land that had been his home in a previous existence. To provide some background, George lost his life to a gunshot on July 6, 2025, but now finds himself reborn in a mysterious location called the Island of Despair. Completely confused, George remains clueless about his current situation. The final memory he held was of completing an assignment somewhere in the Middle East. Now he found himself suddenly relocated to Tokyo Bay in Japan. Nothing seemed to make sense. Corpses had suddenly appeared before him, discarded carelessly and leaving him in shock. Some time passed before he, dressed in his shabby clothes, he raced at full speed through the thick forest. Despite only making a brief sprint, he finds himself gasping for air as if he had completed a long-distance race. It appeared that his present physique lacked the strength and stamina it used to possess. Right on time, his stomach lets out a low, hungry growl. He found himself yearning for food, hoping to fuel both his mind and body with the energy they deserved. Later on, he discovers a patch of bamboo that is plentiful enough. He was given some water so he wouldn't get dehydrated for now. Perched high above the ground, someone rested on the branches of a towering tree. From his elevated vantage point, he spotted a cluster of several hundred homes below. The area looked far more like a slum than a proper town. George wandered through the grimy streets, carefully observing his surroundings to understand his predicament. Based on the information he had pieced together, he realized that this location was situated somewhere near Tokyo Bay. As he reflected on his surroundings, he realized that such a filthy slum was unusual to find in Japan. Without warning, he catches sight of something that leaves him stunned. He gazed into the mirror, unable to believe the reflection staring back at him. He had changed so much that he no longer resembled his former self, and even his body felt unfamiliar to him. Just then, things grew even more confusing when a voice from behind addressed him as. George reacted on instinct, swiftly seizing the mysterious person who had unexpectedly touched his shoulder. Observing that the individual appeared to be without any weapons, it seemed reasonable to conclude that he posed no danger. The boy released his hold on the stranger, realizing that this mysterious individual could hold the key to all the troubling questions swirling in George's thoughts. At first, George takes a moment to process the idea that in this life, he is called, at least according to the mysterious individual before him. He also realizes that this stranger seems to think of him as a friend. He regained his composure, expressed regret for his earlier harsh actions, and reached out to assist his friends in getting back on their feet. The friend feels a sense of relief wash over them when they notice the boy is doing well. He had endured a vicious assault not long ago. Naturally, had no recollection of ever encountering experiences that were so disagreeable. The friend revealed the identity of the person responsible for their suffering, naming as the culprit. Before the friend has a chance to explain further, the true source of their fear appears just behind them, as though drawn forth by the inevitability of their misfortune. Their instincts immediately signaled that this guy was just another brute, convinced he was the star of the show. The man grew irritated after he caught the purple-haired individual carelessly saying his name aloud, clearly displeased that neither of them bothered to show proper respect when mentioning him. The gorilla grew furious at the blatant disrespect shown by the miners, convinced they deserved retribution. With anger boiling over, he clenched his massive fist and hurled a lifeless object. The unfortunate boy took a powerful punch directly to his face, making no attempt to move out of the way. The force of the blow propelled him backward, causing him to slide across the ground. Despite pouring all his frustration into that one powerful punch, the man remained restless, his anger still simmering and demanding another outlet. He seizes the unfortunate man by the hair, repeating the rules that exist solely to benefit himself. Any attempt to protest would simply earn someone an early grave. Unable to endure any longer, the untrustworthy friend shifted all the blame onto, insisting that had been the one who carelessly called out to the gorilla without using any respectful titles. Against all odds, this untrustworthy companion succeeded in persuading the gorilla. The individual was preparing to set their sights on as their upcoming target. He pulled the thin guy aside and faced the main character directly. With a look of disbelief, he admitted he was shocked to see the boy unharmed, since after the last brutal encounter he hadn't expected him to make it. Despite the ugly gorilla's aggressive behavior, the boy showed no reaction and stayed completely unfazed. He remained so stoic that even the gorilla took note of his lack of emotion. The sight only encouraged the man to strike the boy harder. He prepared for the assault by flexing his fingers and cracking his knuckles, as if warming up before the violence began. Despite the situation, he remained completely unbothered, his expression calm and collected without a hint of worry. In the end, the man's arrogance overwhelms his self-control. The brute lunged forward, his fist slicing through the air toward the protagonist, who simply and allowed the punch to miss him entirely. Clearly, this opponent relied on sheer strength rather than any real intelligence. Immediately recognizes that the man before him is inexperienced and clearly out of his depth. Normally, he avoided getting into fights with ordinary people, but this time, being targeted left him with no other choice. He needed to take action to maintain his composure. Suddenly, he changed completely, transforming from an ordinary high schooler into a fierce fighter reminiscent of Mike. Moving with perfect timing, he dodged smoothly, allowing the larger boy's fist to sail harmlessly above his head. He quickly counterattacked after defending himself. The attack landed with such force that it completely disoriented the man, leaving him dazed and confused. Although his body remained intact, mentally, he felt as if his pride had been shattered beyond recovery. The sole reason this man's head remained intact was that the body the protagonist currently inhabited lacked the necessary physical power. Despite the odds, the boy refuses to retreat. Gathering his courage, he lunges forward to confront his enemy once more. He quickly moved to the left side of the larger opponent, dodging the blow aimed at him. He firmly sets his stance and delivers a decisive blow. A powerful blow struck the opponent's shoulder with crushing force. The mark stood out prominently, impossible to overlook on the large face. Fragments of shattered teeth scatter in all directions as a torrent of blood pours from his mouth. The pig was at last confronted with the truth, realizing he was not the story's protagonist as he had once believed. The scene served only as a preview, and felt confident he could show the entire spectacle if his opponent insisted. Otherwise, he saw no reason to keep Fatty around, since wasting time with inexperienced challengers was beneath him. Stung by the harsh words, spins around and walks away, convinced that the argument has ended. Everyone understood that this overweight character, despite the stereotypes, always had some sneaky schemes up his sleeve. He revealed a knife, brandishing an actual weapon against a teenager who clearly stood no chance against him. In that moment, his actions showed just how much of a lowlife he truly was. The attacker lunged toward the boy, aiming to end his life with the sharp dagger gripped tightly in his hand. Although no longer possessed his former body, his lively spirit remained unchanged. He became aware of the incoming attack before it landed. Just as he is about to respond, a child suddenly charges forward and knocks him aside with a forceful headbutt. The character follows the direction the dagger travels. Skillfully the dagger once more, moving with swift precision. The attack is skillfully redirected. Once the man's hands were securely restrained. His eyes flashed with a hostility that felt even more dangerous than the blade in his hand. The fact that this heavy-set man had drawn a weapon made it obvious that he was prepared to risk everything, either to take a life or lose his own. The young man stood prepared, determined to grant the reckless individual's dangerous request. He strikes his opponent hard, the blow landing squarely on the man's collarbone, after causing him to stumble and fall. With impressive force, he overpowered the opponent, who towered over everyone with a size rivaling that of an actual elephant. The boy who had gambled everything stood frozen in shock, his jaw dropping as he struggled to grasp the reality of his actions. Everyone could see the undeniable truth. Those tortured cries escaping from the overweight man's body served as undeniable evidence. He loses his life before he can even begin to recover. His opponent braced himself as the fighter prepared to unleash another powerful blow. With a gentle gesture, someone handed over the item, indicating that it was now ready to be taken. The final explosive strike. The character aimed to launch his enemy so far that he would soar past the sky itself. The child gazes in amazement while the man. He drew back his fist, stained with blood. Although the man had lost consciousness, the force used against him had not been powerful enough to completely destroy his head. He intended to take his opponent out permanently, but his frail body betrayed him yet again. The harm he managed to inflict was minimal, especially when compared to the strength he once possessed. It was about time for him to begin strengthening his frail body, determined to reclaim the peak of the power he once possessed. In the background, a young boy stood, his eyes wide with wonder as he watched the scene unfold. He couldn't pinpoint when the timid he remembered had transformed into someone so strong and confident. The child is eager to get immediate explanations. Chooses to reveal a bit of the truth. He insisted that he could not remember anything, emphasizing how significant this memory loss was. He was unable to recall anyone because of this. Everyone there, even the young boy, was part of the crowd. The boy introduces himself as, mentioning that he is the neighbor who lives next door. Walked by the pig's lifeless form, insisting he couldn't remember anyone with the name. The young child felt a surge of irritation upon hearing those words. It seemed impossible to them that could forget the special connection they shared, especially considering how wild and unforgettable their partnership was. The pig lay sprawled on the floor, having finally lost control. Heat seemed to radiate from his head, as if his anger had reached a visible, fiery peak. At the same time, the pair made their way through the grimy alleyways of the slums. The younger one couldn't stop replaying in his mind the incredible moves his companion had used in that intense confrontation with the overbearing brute. Feeling a surge of inspiration, he becomes eager to pick up some techniques himself. Meanwhile, pays little attention to words and instead shares his curiosity about uncovering more secrets of the island. The child goes on to describe their home as an island made from industrial waste, drifting in the waters of Tokyo Bay. They compare it to a kingdom built on trash, teeming with dirt and abandonment. Ford discovering a place like this in Japan was a complete surprise, as he had never imagined such a thing could exist. In this place, the men had no choice but to give up their very souls and thoughts. Women and children managed to get by, either by selling various items or by scavenging through piles of trash. In this place, there was no such thing as security. To describe it as a cesspool would have been an understatement. It was a decaying wasteland where filth thrived and any hope for progress faded away. Pondered deeply, realizing that neighborhoods in such dire condition usually appeared only in places ravaged by war, or perhaps in circumstances even more desperate. While strolling along, they encounter a bakery offering food that looks so unappetizing, it could almost be mistaken for something far less desirable. Despite everything, the young child's longing for the old bread becomes so intense that saliva begins to gather in his mouth. The shopkeeper attempts to wave off the penniless child, unintentionally bruising the youngster's pride. The child silently fumes, questioning what gave this man the authority to look down on someone else. At that moment, his friend reached into his pocket and revealed The person placed a bill on the counter and let it fall from their hand. The shop owner could hardly believe their eyes when so much cash was handed over by a teenager who appeared to be homeless. On the other hand, feels an immense surge of happiness as he receives the piece of bread. Excitement lights up his face, and he can hardly contain his delight. He wondered how the other person had managed to come by such a large sum of money. The boy explains that he picked it up during his last battle. He feels no pride in looting from the dead, but in a harsh place like this, he knows that survival is more important than following his conscience, and every bit of money counts. Naturally, listening to him speak in that manner, immediately recognizes that the person before him is nothing like the he once knew. After some time had passed, the group reached the children's home. Inside the house, the child's mother rested on the bed, appearing frail and unwell. The cheerful child eagerly announced that they would enjoy a special meal that night thanks to the bread he had brought home. The mother's appearance resembled that of a withered leaf, her frail body silently revealing the harsh reality of malnutrition. Despite her own suffering, her thoughts remained fixed on her child, showing greater worry for the youngster's well-being than her own. She insisted that the child take the bread, placing her child's needs above her own hunger. The affectionate son explained to his caring mother that he had already eaten enough, insisting that the meal was meant for her to enjoy. Despite her mother's insistence, the child calmly offered reassurance once more, encouraging her mother to eat the food without hesitation. A warm grin lights up the boy's face as he witnesses the touching scene before him. However, it isn't long before problems begin to arise. Struggled with the door, putting all his effort into forcing it open. The main character tried to open the front door, but it wouldn't budge. Flames began to crawl rapidly across the rooms, threatening to trap everyone inside and turn them into easy prey for the unstoppable force of nature. The miners, following orders from the same man who appeared eager for another confrontation, had set fire to their crib. It seemed that a single confrontation did not satisfy him. In his mind, everything centered around his desires, and he refused to rest until he had achieved his vengeance. The unfortunate mother and her child found themselves confined within the crib as flames raced through the room, spreading even more quickly than older parents sharing rumors online. At the same time, the boy put all his strength into tearing through the door, hoping to make it to the other side. Despite his determination and repeated attempts, nothing he did seemed to work. His years of training warned him that he was walking straight into a trap. From the way the door had been locked from the outside, he could tell the enemy was trying to contain him. He guessed there were no fewer than 8 or 9 adversaries lying in wait beyond the door. He scans his surroundings, taking in every detail of the house. He quickly scanned the area, searching for something he could turn into an improvised weapon. At last, his gaze settles on a pouch that is. The object appeared to hold something inside. They reached out and took hold of the pouch. The young man hurried outside. With one powerful kick, the door bursts open. The men who had been trying to hold it shut are hurled aside, scattering across the ground as if they were nothing more than discarded garbage bags. Outside, the boy found nothing but that contemptible man and his group of equally despicable followers. The whole gang erupted in cruel laughter, their voices echoing like hyenas as they watched their target step out, convinced he was walking straight into danger. The overweight man commanded his submissive followers to encircle him, and the workers quickly followed his instructions. The group closed in around the boy, leaving him no way out as the flames behind blocked any chance of escape. There was no choice left but to confront their enemies head-on. He felt nothing but annoyance toward the stubborn man who refused to change his ways. The man answers with a playful smirk on his face. Believing he has everything under control, he remains confident. However, it's clear to everyone that he's the one about to face defeat. The newcomer has arrived, ready to make him pay for the pride he wounded. The only fitting consequence for such a crime was a sentence of death. Without hesitation, he prepared himself once more, determined to strip away whatever shred of pride the opponent still possessed. She wanted to show him just how mistaken he truly was. In the background, a mother and her son fought for air, their chests heaving as thick, acrid smoke invaded their lungs. The boy shouted to get attention. The person reacts and signals for. They were determined to escape at the earliest opportunity. As the battle commenced, one of the less skillful fighters charged headlong into danger, seemingly unaware of the fate that awaited him. The man believed that simply holding a weapon guaranteed his victory over someone who was defenseless. Unaware of his surroundings, he failed to notice the bag filled with stones. He struck his head with such force that it rendered him unconscious permanently. The people watching, the group including the overweight individual, stood in stunned silence, their mouths agape in disbelief. The pouch was, in fact, the very one had taken before departing from the house. With the pouch in hand, he quickly crafted a simple weapon by wrapping cloth around a handful of small stones. This was a method his companion referred to as the blackjack technique. If handled correctly, this weapon delivers a powerful blow. With enough speed from spinning, it has the potential to break a skull with a single strike. Although it appeared to be an adorable and simple weapon to craft, it possessed the same level of lethality as any other. The rest of the thugs, still unaware of the danger they faced, rushed forward at their adversary without hesitation. His companion charged forward, cutting down each foe in his path with relentless force, wielding his weapon to swiftly defeat them one by one. The object looked like it could easily crush a skull, at least in their opinion. True to the young man's word, every ounce of confidence the scoundrel once possessed had completely vanished. After every opponent had been defeated and the area cleared, the main character strode forward, ready to face the last challenge standing in his way. Faced with a critical turning point, everything hung in the balance. The unfortunate man gathers his courage and charges directly toward the protagonist, determined to face him head-on. With nothing left to lose, he decides that if his end is near, he might as well go down fighting. The protagonist hefted his sack of rocks and brought it crashing down, shattering his opponent's hand into countless pieces. All he could manage was loud, pitiful complaining, as if he had just suffered a humiliating defeat. The dagger that had once been gripped in a threatening manner. Now the character lay sprawled across the ground. The towering man had been brought to his knees, all because of a youngster barely half his age. The sting of this loss was intensified by the sheer embarrassment it brought. His fighter stood poised, preparing to strike the decisive blow that would finally defeat his opponent. The large man suddenly collapses into a pitiful state, pleading desperately for mercy. His next swing with the heavy sack of rocks silenced any further pleading, making it clear that begging was useless. Poised to deliver the final blow, the character prepared to end the fight. Luckily for the villain, a young boy hurried onto the scene and intervened just in time, preventing from carrying out his intended action. The kid desperately tried to convince him, passionately arguing that taking a life was wrong, acting as though the truth of that had never crossed his mind before. Ignores the children's chatter. He continued to spin it in circles, gathering speed with each rotation. The panicked figure broke into a desperate sprint, trying to escape. The boy continued to twirl the bag around in his hand. Once sufficient momentum had built up, he demonstrated expert guidance. The force of inertia remained unchanged. He moved in the direction of his enemy. Fortunately, the powerful strike failed to hit its intended target and instead crashed into a tree nearby, sending it toppling to the ground. It was astonishing to witness how the powerful blow had toppled an entire tree. The onlookers couldn't help but speculate about the consequences if that force had connected with the larger man's body. The image of him being blasted apart and sent flying filled their minds with anticipation. His friend had shared the same hope, but now felt let down because he hadn't succeeded. The complaining troublemaker eventually escapes, barely hanging onto his life. The child lets out a long, relieved breath, finally feeling at ease. Beneath the pale glow of the moon, inside a dimly lit warehouse, a man known for his hefty build stood before his employer. He desperately tried to win favor, pleading for the chance to eliminate, while accusing the young man of being the terrifying force responsible for the destruction of their group. Over time, he succeeded in winning over his boss, which brought a sense of joy. He was completely when his own boss delivered a punch that left his face battered and covered in blood. The boss grew furious upon learning that the overweight subordinate had been defeated by a simple slave miner. He considered this behavior unacceptable and believed the subordinate deserved harsh consequences. The consequence for this action would be as severe as execution. Fatty's eyes filled with tears as he realized exactly what was about to happen. A relentless barrage of punches poured down from the boss. Brass knuckles wrapped tightly around his fists, he pummeled the unfortunate man's face until it became a swollen, bruised blur. Only when his victim was barely recognizable did he finally halt his assault. The loyal dog ended up sampling the blood left behind by its owner's most recent victim. Fatty was believed to be the final target, as everyone knew the boss had already chosen their friend as the next victim, and the outcome seemed inevitable. Later on, the scene shifts back to the dilapidated home stood quietly as night fell, with the child and his ailing mother settling into rest. The child senses the burden of his hard work slipping away, realizing that everything he invested in creating that place has now been lost. He stands frozen, overwhelmed by a sense of powerlessness as he struggles to find any solution in such a desperate moment. The ailing mother feels uneasy about remaining in his room, worrying that her presence might cause trouble for him. The boy remains unfazed by the arrangement, accepting it as a straightforward transaction. He isn't acting out of kindness or compassion. Instead, he's simply upholding his end of their agreement. In return, they provide him with valuable information about the island. He is determined to uncover every aspect of how the place functions, from the storage locations of food and essential supplies to any other crucial details that could be used against the oppressive leaders in control. His curiosity leaves no room for oversight. He is intent on learning every minor fact. On the other hand, has grown increasingly irritated by the blank look and emotionless voice that has been displaying recently. The child appeared completely overwhelmed, while his friend believed that behavior toward someone he barely knew was inappropriate. Realizes that his friend no longer remembers the past, yet he can't comprehend why his friend's whole demeanor has shifted so drastically. A sense of confusion filled the air as someone questioned whether reality itself was malfunctioning. Inside, finds himself agreeing with the boy's words. In his former existence, he had served as a soldier, only to be fatally betrayed by the very comrades he trusted. He believed that a higher-ranking officer orchestrated his attempted assassination, and he suspected Captain Beck most of all. After everything that had occurred, he felt unwilling to remain inactive in the slums. He was determined to break free from this wretched place and make every traitor who had betrayed and killed him pay for their actions. Every morning, he follows his regular exercise routine, determined to regain some of the strength he once possessed. He begins by balancing himself upside down on his hands. Next, they transition to performing push-ups in an upright, vertical position. He focused on exercising both his arms and core to ensure they were properly strengthened. Only by reclaiming his previous body would he have any chance of surviving in this place. As he moved through the motions of his morning ritual, a figure dashes in his direction. It turned out to be the same person she had encountered earlier. The person responsible for betraying their friend in the most blatant way possible. The boy had arrived to make sure, remembered their upcoming shift in the mines, knowing that being late would only lead to punishment. He chose not to fixate on previous betrayals, even when someone had turned against him so suddenly. Instead, he set his sights on the mines, hoping he could pick up some valuable information there. Deep beneath the surface, within the shadowy mines, the miners lined up in 2 neat rows, waiting attentively as their boss supervised them. In the group stood the boy alongside several of the troublemakers he had overpowered the previous day. As soon as they noticed him and his friends, nervous tremors ran through them. It quickly becomes clear to exactly who these men are. The boss raises his voice and delivers an important message with a sense of urgency. Who had been responsible for leading Team G had passed away. The announcement crashes into the room with overwhelming force, leaving everyone stunned, but none more so than old followers. With no longer in the picture, the boss chose number 8 to take charge of Team G, even though this was the very person who had once betrayed their friend. Naturally, he struggled to accept that he was now occupying the position once held by the person he had always dreaded. Regarding the mine, the enslaved workers endured grueling physical labor each day, starting at 7 in the morning and continuing until 11 at night. Deep beneath the surface, they toiled in the tunnels, enduring extremely harsh conditions. The harsh and relentless work environment leads to numerous health issues, particularly affecting individuals in their 40s. They struggled to stay on pace. More often than not, workers faced punishment for moving too slowly or taking unscheduled breaks. No matter the reason, a beating was the consequence they received. Fortunately, on this occasion, Number 8 was assigned the role of site supervisor. Masa was known for his constant complaints and suspicious nature, yet beneath it all, he had a generous heart. He offers words of support to his coworkers, helping to lift their spirits. He made an effort to check in on each of his teammates, sharing uplifting remarks with every one of them. It became clear that he wasn't as unfriendly as he first appeared. Also feels happy to witness this moment. Without warning, the head of the mining camp began shouting angrily at the laborers. He forcefully shoves Masa aside and moves ahead. He had no patience for those who behaved gently or showed too much emotion, believing that this was an environment where only tough, genuine men belonged. At the moment when the unfortunate miner is on the verge of receiving a needless punishment, the young man hurled his pickaxe toward the ground, aiming it directly at the enemy's feet. He made it seem as though his hand had accidentally moved. He quickly offers an apology, but his tone is harsh and forceful. The apology clearly failed to appease the aggressive man, whose arrogance had grown ever since he secured a higher-ranking position. He prepared himself for a fight with the main character. The boss made his entrance. Despite the frustration it caused the man, their lives continued on. The boss, having listened in on the whole conversation, decided that his subordinate should take on the large opponent in his place. Was the name by which he was known. Panic swept through everyone's thoughts as the important figure suddenly appeared. The once arrogant bully who intimidated everyone at work now found himself gripped by fear. Facing his master, he knew he would never have the courage to stand up to him. She felt a wave of disappointment wash over her. Clenches his hand into a tight fist. He delivered a powerful blow to his subordinate's head. The rest of the group seemed to be unraveling, their composure slipping away. Observed the man's abilities, carefully paying attention to each skill he demonstrated. Aimed with precision at his opponent's pressure points, skillfully rendering his rival unconscious. With the henchman defeated, the villain prepared himself to face his next opponent. Because his sole purpose for coming was to challenge their friend, he seizes the opportunity and attempts to provoke into a one-on-one battle. Always followed a firm personal code that forbade him from getting into fights unless there was a valid reason. Remained determined, refusing to retreat before he had the chance to trade punches with the protagonist. The man suddenly charged toward with aggression. In response, the character swiftly positioned themselves, prepared to defend at a moment's notice. The muscular blonde man had been determined to uncover the traitor responsible for attacking his subordinate. The boy reacts instantly, raising his arms to shield himself from harm. Sprang forward in a sudden burst of motion. A relentless barrage of strikes crashes against guard. Every hit lands with powerful force, making it nearly impossible for him to block or withstand the onslaught. Even the onlookers, including Masa and his friends, were certain that if things continued as they were, would end up killing him. Finds himself utterly overpowered, with no opportunity to fight back. He moves at a measured pace. He searches for a chance to strike, silently acknowledging his opponent's impressive fighting skills as each punch is delivered with expert precision. Even though he performed flawlessly, no person could sustain such flawless assaults. His broad, sweeping attacks left him vulnerable to counterattacks. Taking full advantage of the situation, the boy acted swiftly. Moving with swift reflexes, he evades the incoming strike and delivers a powerful punch straight to his opponent's face. Masa and the others stood in stunned silence, unable to find anything to say. They struggled to accept that their friend had actually managed to land a hit on's face. However, the situation seemed almost unreal, as if it couldn't possibly last. Even after taking advantage of the opening, the boy's fist didn't land its mark. The blonde opponent intercepted the punch with ease, clearly surprised and impressed to find someone capable of matching his skills. He clearly had no intention of giving up the fight. Without warning, a booming voice interrupts and orders everyone to be silent. At the moment director came into view, the miners immediately drop to their knees, showing their respect. Everyone around him treats him with the utmost respect. He was out there doing his best to imitate's presence. Had at last discovered the identity of the man in charge, of overseeing everything on the island. The director's irritation was evident as he observed's behavior. He thought that if he continued to beat the slaves to death, they would keep escaping or dying, and he would lose even more of them. He goes so far as to warn that he will inform, who is bound by a blood pact unless the behavior ceases. Merely hearing the name of the bloodthirsty Marquis sent a chill down spine, making him pause to rethink what he was about to do. He suddenly adopted a friendly demeanor, pretending he only wanted to offer some helpful advice to the miners. As walked by, he fixed the brute with a scornful glare and harshly reminded him that his only real talent was throwing punches. Anything demanding even average intelligence, implied, was completely out of his reach. The comment angers him deeply, stirring intense frustration within. Although the idea of him striking his boss was appealing, he knew that option was completely out of reach. Approached the slaves who were kneeling, and reminded them that their main responsibility was to concentrate on mining, rather than consuming the soil beneath their feet. He regarded them as inferior beings, believing their sole purpose was to labor in the mines until their final breath. The story shifts to a moment when they take a break for lunch. While ate his meal, a deep sense of gloom settled over him, brought on by the food's cold temperature and complete lack of flavor. His colleagues recoiled at the flavor, and secretly those in charge. They always seemed to enjoy delicious food. The slaves pleaded for the chance to enjoy a delicious lunchbox, hoping for a meal as appetizing as the ones others received. As focused on his meal, his friends expressed their dissatisfaction. Unexpectedly, Masa appears beside the young man. He shared a sample of the delicious lunch he had been given, knowing that his role as a supervisor allowed him to join those fortunate enough to enjoy such fine meals. He hopes to show it too. Despite the tempting offer, the boy firmly turned it down, leaving Masa utterly astonished. It was almost unimaginable for anyone to say no to such a meal. The boy's decision to decline was deeply connected to his character, as he preferred not to be indebted to others. Upon hearing this, Masa chooses to take a seat beside him and clarifies that the situation isn't about repaying a favor. Instead, this was how he chose to express his apology. Had once attacked him, and in the aftermath, he shifted all responsibility onto, falsely claiming was at fault. Now he was trying to make amends for his past actions. He was unable to continue living with the belief that he had let someone down. Upon coming to understand that Masa was, in fact, a kind person, the boy grinned and chose to go along with what was happening. He picks up a single piece of chicken and he placed it in his mouth, hoping it would balance out the single falsehood he had told. However, that marked the limit of his involvement with Masa's meal, as Masa remained captivated by his behavior. His canine companions suddenly leaped onto his back, catching him off guard. After the boy turned down the offer, someone pleaded desperately to be given the meal instead. Masa, feeling defeated, chooses to split a single piece between the two, demonstrating his thoughtfulness toward his comrades. The group's brief respite is abruptly interrupted when a higher-ranking officer approaches and scolds them loudly for having too much fun. He instructs the group to hurry back to their positions and resume their duties without delay. As went through a typical workday, he came to understand that their superiors saw little value in the slaves. The group labored tirelessly, rarely receiving enough to eat or time to rest. The demanding routine soon proved overwhelming, and one man collapsed to the ground, completely exhausted from pushing himself too far. Masa hurried over, worry etched on his face as he examined the other's well-being. The character wished to assist the man, but at that moment, a higher-ranking official approached. He signaled for him to step out of the way. He delivered a swift kick to the man's body. She rolled him onto his back and searched for a pulse. The result, however, is harsh and unfeeling. The man had died, yet not a single prayer was spoken for him. The superior bellowed at Group G, demanding that they hastily abandon their injured teammate. This was the harsh reality these individuals faced every day. Masa's body trembles as genuine tears streamed down their face as they mourned the loss of a human. He hopes won't end up burning himself to death the way this man did. Despite his advice, there seemed to be little hope for change. The managers remained indifferent, continuing to demand grueling physical work from the miners. The loss of one of their own did nothing to grant them even a moment of respite. Finally accepts the harsh truth. In this place, human lives are valued even less than trash. At last, the painfully drawn-out day had finally come to an end. The scene concluded as the manager raised a bell and rang it, signaling the end. Masa, struggling to keep himself upright, feels a surge of joy as he looks upon the finished sight. In contrast, seemed completely unfazed, as if he hadn't even started his workday yet. He truly stood out as someone unique from everyone else. He explained to his friend that he was accustomed to enduring this level of physical effort, so it no longer troubled him. Masa finds it hard to accept what he's seeing, his mind racing with doubts about whether it could possibly be human anymore. The manager shouts angrily, demanding that they end their meaningless discussion. At the close of each day, the workers were compelled to remove their clothes, left exposed and weary from their labor. The group receives instructions to climb the stairs continuously, without pausing along the way. The manager urges the team to go further than what feels familiar or easy for them. They check over everyone's bodies to make sure nothing gets stolen. In addition, it involved inspecting the backsides of everyone, since it seemed that a thief might resort to hiding something there. After the inspection concluded, they were escorted above ground, where Group G9 waited to receive their payment. In exchange for a full day's labor, the workers received only a paltry sum of 1,000 yen. 16 painfully long hours had passed, and all of it had led to this single moment. To the slaves, receiving this payment feels as if they suddenly have a fortune deposited into their bank accounts. One individual was behaving suspiciously with the bill, making it seem as if he might become so attached to it that he would marry it. Felt a wave of revulsion and surprise as he observed the slaves, unable to comprehend how they could find happiness amid such unpleasant circumstances. Without warning, the slaves are overcome with genuine joy. Remained confused, unable to grasp why everyone was responding the way they did. At the sight of the smiley sale venue, they began to jump around excitedly, unable to contain their enthusiasm. The seller, a strikingly attractive young woman, arrived to offer them a generous 20% discount as a gesture of gratitude for their dedication. The boy had no idea that there was such a thing as a mining appreciation day. He stood in disbelief as his colleagues dashed about wildly, behaving more like frantic creatures than professionals, all in their frantic pursuit of closing a deal. The man from before returned, choosing to spend a third of his earnings on a beer and a bag of chips. Not only does he give in to temptation, but he also lets his desire get the better of him and grabs a squid snack for himself. Much like the first man, the other slaves began to lose control, their wild behavior prompting the woman to order them to settle down. The slaves wasted no time in becoming intoxicated after drinking the beer. They found themselves filled with a unique happiness that they knew would be impossible to experience in any other way. Some people carefully avoid using up all their money, but others end up spending everything they have in just a single day. Observing these individuals as they eagerly indulged in fleeting joys, squandering every bit of their money, found himself once more doubting the actions of those around him. Just moments before, these slaves had been subjected to harsh and degrading treatment, but now an overwhelming sense of elation made them feel as if they had risen above all their troubles. Masa walked by, feeling a pang of regret for ever having those around him. During this time, the boy discovers that he hasn't actually used any money at all, although he longed to feel the same happiness that his colleagues enjoyed. Maz remained determined to achieve his objective. In order to buy the pass, he knew he would have to save diligently. Curiosity sparked within, prompting him to swiftly inquire about details concerning the pass. Observing this, Masa recognized that had already forgotten the assurances they had received upon first setting foot on the island. In the past, people referred to them as slaves, believing they would be made to endure exhausting hours and suffer treatment more cruel than that given to animals. Simultaneously, a final glimmer of hope was offered to them. Any slave who succeeded in collecting a total of 1 million yen would earn the opportunity to buy the pass, a ticket that granted them everlasting release from the island. During that period, the group made a pact to set aside their earnings in hopes of one day leaving the island behind. Back then, the man wearing glasses, who had been so obsessed with his bill, was the loudest of them all. Now he was nothing more than a fool lost in his own indulgence, having squandered all his wealth. Masa remained unwavering in his ambitions, setting himself apart from the others. At that time, he confidently announced his intentions. No matter how roughly he was pushed or jostled, he refused to part with even a single yen. The young man appeared to have drawn considerable inspiration from David, judging by his determined demeanor. In his mind, the fragments of information began to fit together. Even though this was the harshest place imaginable, he realized that the slaves did not rebel because they were each offered two unattainable hopes. Their earliest aspiration was the dream of hope, symbolized by the pass, a goal that seemed almost impossible for them to reach. The second dream involved constantly seeking enjoyment, ensuring that people remained occupied with the pursuit of pleasure. The administrators of the island possessed a deep understanding of human psychology. The idea involved overwhelming someone with intense sensations of delight. The method was crafted with such precision that it filled the boy with deep-seated revulsion. He pulled a crumpled note from his pocket and walked over to Masa, wanting to know how much more he needed to save before he could afford the pass. Masa hesitated, concerned that answering such a delicate question might land him in trouble. Remained earnest, making it clear to the man that he had no desire to share any confidential information. He even gives up his own pay to support Masa's mission. He thought that someone like him should be able to find a way out. In the following scene, it becomes clear that Masa still needs $60,000 to reach his ambitious savings target. With the prospect of his savings doubling from this point forward, calculates that Masa should have enough funds to buy the pass within a month. Although his friend is grateful for the kindness, he remains completely puzzled about what could motivate someone to make such an effort on his behalf. The boy reassured him, explaining that he was also acting in his own best interest. He prioritized evaluating the state of the ocean, also inquiring about the presence of any boat docks nearby. Masa waved his arm enthusiastically, signaling for others to come over. Decided to examine the situation closely by himself. There seemed to be no possible escape for anyone trapped there, since steep cliffs completely enclosed the island. Meanwhile, driven by curiosity and a spirit of adventure, attempted to descend the cliffs to examine the area more closely. His friend rushed over, cautioning him that trying to leave the island would be considered a major crime. Amused, the boy found it hard to accept that strict rules still existed on a place as nightmarish as this island. While making his way down, suddenly becomes aware of an unexpected noise. He scanned his surroundings, and at last, his eyes landed on something more dreadful than he could have ever feared. The drone hovering above was equipped with weapons, and it was no ordinary machine. The object appeared to be built to top-tier military standards. Hurriedly attempts to pull himself back up. His friend remained confused, unable to understand how a drone had suddenly appeared. As soon as pulls himself up again, he bellows at Masa, urgently commanding him to begin running without delay. The fool begins to question things. A bullet suddenly whizzed by, scraping the side of his face. The situation made it clear to him that the boy was completely serious. The two of them dashed away with all the speed they could muster, as if everything was at stake. Mace shouted loudly, his voice echoing, while the other boy, finding the situation amusing, urged him to quiet down. The drone unleashed a rapid spray of bullets, yet, as if guided by protagonist luck, the main character managed to avoid them all. All of their attempts ended up missing the target. Glances curiously at the drone. In no time, they determine that the device is an SG Nemesis, version 1. The device locks onto a target in motion, and relentlessly pursues it until the target is eliminated. No matter what, even if someone managed to escape in Andrew Tate's, the creature would relentlessly pursue them without stopping. Known as the Mad Pursuer, this drone proved so deadly that even experienced soldiers on the front lines were shaken with terror at its presence. The boy comes to the realization that they would eventually have to stop, as escaping endlessly was not an option. He quickly altered his path, guiding the drone straight into a corner with no way out. Masa believed the idea was unwise, yet he had no choice except to depend on strategy for the moment. Moving as fast as possible, the character dashed ahead. The group altered their path, veering into the dense forest, which compelled the drone to pursue them through the tangled trees. Possessing tracking abilities that seemed almost divine, the creature quickly closes the distance between itself and the group. Meanwhile, found himself working hard to make sure Masa didn't fall behind as they moved together. Sadly, most people lack his incredible endurance, particularly after finishing a grueling 16-hour shift. The atmosphere grew increasingly strained as exhaustion began to set in for them. With each passing moment, the danger of being struck by a bullet became more likely. Suddenly, a new thought sparks in his mind. Spotted a harmless mouse perched on a branch, and realized that this tiny creature might be their key to escaping death. Bro quickly the master, making sure not a moment was lost. He quickly accessed his inventory and surged forward. At the same time, he told Masa to freeze as soon as his countdown ended. Despite his exhaustion, Masa believes pausing in front of a device capable of riddling them with countless holes is a reckless choice. Paying no attention to Masa, the boy began his countdown and sprinted forward, quickly leaving Masa behind. The drone relentlessly unleashes a stream of bullets at its targets. At last, the moment arrived. The boy indicated that his countdown had finished. Placing all his hopes on this single chance, tightens his hold on the mouse, silently expressing regret for his imminent actions. After that, he hurls the helpless little one. The small figure stood bravely, ready to face the looming drone. This action prompted the system to where its target was positioned. The drone swiftly recalibrated its sensors and caught sight of the mouse making its getaway. The creature focused intensely as it zeroed in on its chosen prey. A barrage of bullets tears through the air, leaving the creature with no chance of survival. The viewers silently mourn the loss, paying their respects to the defeated soldier. Because of that brief chance, Masa managed to avoid a deadly situation and make their escape. The drone remained present, forcing everyone to endure its scanning period before they could proceed. The drone makes every effort to scan its surroundings, attempting to locate its intended target. Someone even came so close that they were right up in her personal space. The intention was to notice even the most subtle shift in his actions. Meanwhile, is putting a tremendous amount of effort into mewing. His entire body remains completely still, unable to respond or make the slightest movement. The sole issue that remained was the sweat trickled down his cheeks. Fortunately, the sound it made was barely noticeable. The drone misses the detail entirely. Actually, its path shifts to a different direction. She decides that the task has been fully carried out. That was the way Masa, and managed to escape the fury of their relentless pursuer. The situation had come dangerously close to disaster. The boy was fully aware of it as well. He assisted his friend, clarifying that the deadly device they had just confronted was actually a drone created by the military. The machine existed solely to destroy, showing no compassion and unable to distinguish between friend and foe. Because of its extreme savagery and flawed design, it was deemed unfit for battle and was never deployed again. Masa couldn't believe anyone would consider deploying a drone like that in combat, finding the thought deeply disturbing. The boy stood deep in contemplation, unable to comprehend the reason behind the presence of such a merciless weapon on the island. The drone had been considered so hazardous that authorities prohibited its sale to foreign nations. The island revealed far more secrets than he had expected, leaving him to wonder whether the military might somehow be involved. Following a close brush with death caused by the drones, manages to make his way back home at last. Immediately, the young child becomes filled with excitement at seeing him alive. He noticed the delay in its return, and worry crept into his expression. However, the boy's mother gently reminded him to concentrate on giving their friend a warm welcome. His curiosity piqued, approached to find out what was being prepared. She realizes that is experimenting with a unique stew. However, judging by its appearance, it would be a stretch to label it a specialty dish. To his astonishment, the child considered the meal a special delicacy simply because they had been given leftovers. The fact that the food was both leftovers and considered fancy highlighted just how wretched the existence of these slaves really was. Without waiting any longer, the group prepared to taste the food and see just how talented the small-statured chef really was. Lifts the spoon to his lips and tastes the food. They expected the dish to be flavorful and satisfying. The expression on his face made it clear that calling it food was a stretch. He silently wondered how his life had led him to this moment, finding the meal so sour that he doubted whether it was even meant to be eaten. Even the bleak meals from his military days seemed far superior to the dog food in front of him now. Despite the meal's unappetizing and gloomy nature, seemed to be thoroughly enjoying himself. Found himself completely unable to understand why anyone would respond that way. The boy seemed completely captivated by the flavor, as if he had never experienced anything more delicious in his life. Meanwhile, found himself puzzled by the boy's intense enthusiasm for such a simple meal. He discovers that finding scraps on this miserable island is actually much harder than he expected. Ultimately, his childhood meals had been far less appetizing, making this new fare seem delightful by comparison. As he eagerly consumed earthworms, savoring them as if they were delicious noodles. Noticed the worry etched on his mother's face. She avoided meeting his eyes, and he quickly sensed her unease. The little boy's eyes sparkled with amazement and joy as he discovered a small scrap of meat hidden in the remnants of the meal, and he couldn't help but rejoice at his find. For those enslaved and the island's residents, stumbling upon even the smallest piece of meat felt as thrilling as hitting the jackpot. The child eagerly grabbed the morsel, and once their modest feast came to an end, he faces the boy and extends his hand, palm open. Still puzzled, remains uncertain about what he is expected to give. The boy's face twisted in irritation as he demanded the food money, insisting he had earned it by preparing a good meal for everyone. His hard-earned pay ended up in someone else's hands almost as soon as he received it, leaving him with nothing left to offer. Felt utterly crushed when he learned that the boy had handed over his money to a total stranger. Situation became even more dire when he discovered that, from this point forward, Masa would be taking his entire daily earnings. The boy's surprise is so intense that his treasured bowl of stew slips from his hands and spills over. They placed all the responsibility on the young man, who was likely silently begging that consuming this awful meal wouldn't lead to a heart attack. Felt a deep sadness as he realized his beloved stew had been ruined. As finished his meal, he began outlining the strategy he had devised. He tells the child what to do next. She gathered all the remaining food and hurried after him. Unaware of what surprises awaited him, the kid chose to trust and act on the advice given to him. In the following scene, the group found themselves standing amidst the trees of the forest. Found himself gazing at a basket overflowing with scraps, completely unsure of what the man nearby was planning to do under the cover of darkness. To everyone's surprise, took the bowl of stew and abruptly turned it upside down, spilling its contents onto the ground. In his opinion, it seemed that valuable food was being squandered. Although that wasn't the main issue, the boy had a clever plan. He wanted to use the foul-smelling scraps to set up an ambush. The old basket was meant to work as an anchor, designed to snare any creature tempted by the food inside. Once the trap was ready, the boy felt sure that it could help them catch at least some smaller animals. The mere thought of rats could make anyone feel revolted, and even who called a rundown island home was not immune to that feeling. Pointed out an important detail. While sewer rats often carry harmful diseases, wild rats are a different matter entirely. He noted that, in desperate times, wild rats can actually serve as a valuable source of protein. Didn't mind finding different prey if wasn't interested in rats, and he welcomed the boy to join him on a longer stroll. After a while, the child's curiosity grows, making him restless. He starts to question whether the group intends to arrange additional traps in hopes of capturing more prey. In his opinion, placing traps in the denser regions of the forest seemed illogical. Nevertheless, the experienced soldier recognized the strategic value hidden within those tangled thickets. Animals tend to feel more secure in environments where shelter or hiding spots are readily available. His eyes widened with astonishment, clearly displaying his confusion. As he noticed the snare had set, he realized it had successfully ensnared a bird, lured in by a basic baited mechanism. Seeing the small creature caught in the trap, believed they had gathered plenty to enjoy a good meal that evening. His face lights up with happiness as he nods in agreement with his idea. The perspective shifted to the administrative building at the mining site to reveal what was happening there. While reviewing the results, discovered that the miners had produced almost 650 tons of material. Unfortunately, the intense labor claimed the lives of 9 slaves, who succumbed to exhaustion during the operation. In just 1 week, the number of deaths had risen sharply, making it clear to everyone that the effects of malnutrition and frailty were finally taking their toll. Serving as the project's deputy director, advocated on behalf of the people's well-being. Recognizing their needs, his compassionate nature led him to believe they deserved better meals and more opportunities to rest. Naturally, given his vile nature, it was no surprise that he behaved so repulsively. He flung the papers into the air, trying to appear impressive. The very phrase, human life, filled him with revulsion, since he believed the island's inhabitants hardly qualified as such. Although attempts to object, brushes him off, showing complete indifference to the increasing number of casualties. His focus remained fixed on the numbers, which kept rising week after week. Driven by ambition, he was determined to surpass his peers and claim the highest position. The idea of being stuck on such a miserable island filled him with nothing but contempt. He showed no concern for the fate of the slaves, indifferent even if they all perished, as long as he could exploit each one to his advantage. His chilling and malevolent remarks sent a tremor of fear through, leaving her frozen in disbelief. Because his rank was lower than He had no choice but to go along with whatever the leader decided. Moving on to the following topic. The total wages for the week came to approximately 2.8 million yen. The value of all goods was about 2.5 million yen, and the recovery rate was nearing 90%. In summary, the group managed to recover nearly all the money they spent on salaries. Those who once reveled in wild parties, spending every last coin for a fleeting taste of joy, never realized they were falling into a cleverly designed snare. Their hard-earned wages vanished, only to be funneled right back into the system that set the trap. Regarded the people before him as little more than animals, easily ensnared by a basic trap and lacking any real awareness. The director asks if there have been any strange incidents. The character discovers that one of the slaves seems to be secretly gathering funds in hopes of obtaining the coveted pass. The entire department burst into laughter at the mere suggestion of someone attempting such a foolish plan, convinced that saving 1 million yen that way was utterly impossible. Simultaneously, grows curious upon hearing about the slave and feels compelled to look into his background. The next day, Masa arrived at his house and requested that he step outside. It seemed, however, that the boy had already stepped outside and was calling out to him from behind the shelter. With curiosity piqued, Masa decided to take a closer look. He found it hard to believe what he was seeing. On a remote island where food was scarce, dedicated himself to rigorous training, aiming to reach a level where he could challenge. Despite the limited resources, his physique had become impressively muscular and defined. Continuing his rigorous training without pause, he inquires about Masa's intentions regarding him. Masa stood in shock, unable to fathom his own actions. He had intended to visit so they could head to work together, yet now he found himself utterly speechless. Halted his training session, taking a moment to clarify that his efforts were focused on fortifying his frail physique. Ultimately, he understood that achieving his ambitions required such dedication. He definitely required the power necessary to regain his former level of skill. He was driven by a desire for revenge against those who had deceived him. Masa remained completely oblivious to his past life, perceiving him merely as an oddball for choosing to train right before enduring a grueling workday. The lively chatter prompted to join them. Upon waking, he turned his attention to the man standing before him. At the mining site, Masa swiftly made his presence known as a colleague of. However, the mere mention of Masa's name stirred up the young child, as had been giving all his earnings to Masa. Insisted on getting his wages back immediately, explaining that he and his companions had intended to use the money to purchase food. The unfortunate child laments their plight, constantly struggling with the lack of funds needed to satisfy their hunger. Masa's mind became flooded with memories as he observed the expression on his face. He recalled a moment when his younger sister experienced hunger. Masa took on the responsibilities of preparing meals and tending to her needs. The young girl had a special affection for the meals her older brother prepared. Masa recalled the time he crafted bread rusks for, a memory filled with happiness. He longed to relive those moments once more. Watched as the individual knelt before him, expressing regret for having taken his money. It was clear that he wasn't reprimanding like a child or using complex adult language to make his point. This display was a perfect example of emotional intelligence. To create a fresh memory for, the man promises the boy a gift the next time they meet, hoping it will help them both move past the current moment. Despite feeling a bit of frustration, remained willing to accept the gift, provided it held significant monetary value. As the laughter subsides, the young man slips on his shirt, preparing himself for the grueling workday that lies ahead. In the following scene, the setting shifts to the mines, where the slaves toil under brutal conditions, pushing many to the edge of complete exhaustion. Masa observed Haida's precarious situation and gestured to his friend, indicating that he should take over Haida's spot. Swiftly moved toward Haida's cumbersome bag, determined to take on his share of the workload so that Haida could enjoy a moment of rest. The director himself took note of Masa's remarkable leadership abilities. The workers' expressions transformed into masks of disbelief. The director found it hard to grasp that had personally arrived to meet them. Masa's deep care for his colleagues genuinely impressed the director. It seemed the rumors about Masa's capability were indeed accurate. While all this unfolded, Maz found himself pondering why he had suddenly captured the director's attention, considering himself as insignificant as an insect. Noted that Masa's skill in producing exceptional results for his team, consistently handling situations without resorting to violence, had caught the attention of the administrative group. The man stood outside, trembling with disbelief. He inclined his body in gratitude, acknowledging the director's generous remarks. His lips curled into a smile, and a nagging feeling suggested his devious mind was scheming once more. The director approached Masa with an unexpected announcement, revealing that he had come to present the young man with a special bonus in recognition of his impressive competence. Such rewards were rare among the workers, leaving Masa genuinely surprised by the acknowledgement of his efforts. Thought that the promise of a reward could increase his enthusiasm for the task at hand. Meanwhile, in the background, exhibited a look of revulsion, hinting that an ominous event was on the horizon. Tu was keenly watching the events as they unfolded. The astute director conveyed that to secure the promised reward, a conversation was necessary in a safer location, as the mine was teeming with deceitful individuals eager to snatch away his prize. With those words, he skillfully persuaded Masa to follow them to a more secure place. Hastily looking to for advice, he hears from him that if he continues at this pace, his dream of obtaining the pass might truly come true. Despite the situation, the young man's instincts were heightened. He felt an urge for Masa to remain vigilant, sensing an unsettling vibe in the air. Overcome with excitement at the prospect of the reward, Masa believed everything would turn out well, interpreting it as a sign of good fortune and a blessing for all the effort put in. With urgency, he dashed off in an attempt to rejoin his group. Before departing, looks at, mentioning his name with a smile gradually forming on his face. The man directed a wicked smile at the boy, tauntingly asking if he was concerned about anything unfortunate befalling his friend. Informed about their plans to hold a gathering at Masa's place. In the upcoming scene, events unfold precisely as anticipated. The innocent young man, feeling embarrassed, leads group back to his humble abode, ashamed to invite his friends into such a messy place. The director insisted that a closed room would be perfect for their discussion. The atmosphere was tense as warning signs of impending doom began to form. The group silently acknowledged the ominous situation, expressing sympathy for Masa's unfortunate predicament. Without hesitation, he ushers them into his home, expressing his regret for the untidy and unwelcoming state of his living space. His face alight with joy, he invited his guests to settle in comfortably as he prepared to brew some tea for everyone to savor together. At that moment, the facade of the heartless director finally crumbled. He expressed his revulsion for the grimy surroundings. Before Masa even has a chance to comprehend the situation, gestured to his men, instructing them to meticulously scour every corner of his residence. Masa stood by powerless as the men ruthlessly ransacked the place, searching for any trace of money. The unfortunate individual finds himself receiving a formidable blow to the stomach delivered by. He was left retching on the ground, desperately gasping for air. A moment later, a young man climbed onto his back, firmly securing both of his arms. Masa's despair deepened to an unprecedented level as he struggled to grasp the situation unfolding around him. Wannabe over here performed the classic glasses adjustment gesture, expressing a shared interest with Masa in purchasing the pass. Meanwhile, the director was eager to uncover the secret location where Wannabe over here stashed all his valuable funds. The unfortunate man found himself speechless. The harsh director seized his hair with a fierce grip. Conveyed a sense of superiority, emphasizing to Masa that he had no patience for delays. The ruthless made it clear that if Masa failed to disclose where the money was hidden, the consequences would extend far beyond mere financial loss. Masa finally understands that the promise of a special bonus had been nothing but a deceitful illusion all along. The director experienced a wave of repulsion at the thought of his limited intellect. Masa found himself in a pitiful and tearful state, desperately begging for compassion. He insisted that he possessed no money, explaining his situation as merely being a slave. Disinclined to squander his time, decisively struck his opponent, forcing him down to the ground with a swift, contemptuous blow. The director, facing defiance from the slave, instructed his men to proceed with the subsequent phase of the operation. He held a pair of pliers tightly in his hand. The man moved closer to Masa, who stood frozen in fear, feeling completely vulnerable and anxious for his safety. The man forcefully inserts the tool into his mouth. The man's hand clamped firmly onto Masa's front teeth, showing no mercy as he began to wrench one free. Masa writhed in agony, tears streaming down his face, desperately pleading for the torment to end. The deranged director paid no attention to the desperate pleas and commanded his subordinates to complete the task. The outcome was a toothache reminiscent of a typical experience at the dentist's clinic. Blood erupted from Masa's mouth as he was consumed by a whirlwind of shock and agony, his mind unraveling in the chaos. The director reiterated to the slave the reality of his status and echoed his previous warnings. Had Masa merely disclosed the location, he could have avoided the suffering he experienced. However, this was not the conclusion of his ordeal. Felt a surge of excitement at the prospect of repeating the action, especially since Masa's silence meant that each refusal cost the slave another fragment of his identity. In the following scene, the workers appear as they wrap up their day, pausing for a well-deserved break. The group was discussing Masa and the mysterious disappearance he shared with the director for an extended period. Meanwhile, some were speculating that the head of the operation had developed a genuine fondness for their friend. The young boy appeared uncertain as he watched the deputy director, making his way back towards them. Despite the smile on his face, his eyes betrayed a deep sense of discontent and sorrow. Driven by curiosity about his friend's situation, inquired about Ma's well-being. The deputy director adeptly pretended not to have any knowledge, skillfully acting, as if he was completely unaware. Retaliates, asserting his awareness of the group's clandestine plotting. Had not anticipated being confronted and thrust into an uncomfortable situation. However, prioritizing safety, he offered the man a piece of advice. The man preferred that the other refrain from delving further into the investigation, if he cared about his personal safety. The guidance left him feeling exasperated, yet regrettably, he found himself powerless to alter the circumstances. In the following scene, it becomes clear that Masa's harrowing ordeal continues unabated. He had lost the majority of his teeth and couldn't utter a word without crying out in agony. He watched as the person humbled themselves in the dirt, warned the slave that if he continued to resist, he might find himself unable to enjoy his meals as he once did. In his weakened state, Masa struggled to form words, managing only to let out another desperate roar. Without any money, he found himself unable to express anything further. The director's irritation only intensified due to the man's relentless persistence, compelling him to extend the period of torment. Masa experienced the loss of another tooth. The truly frightening aspect was yet to come. The captors forced the same sharp tooth into his gums, inflicting an intense and burning pain. After placing the tooth back into its original spot, wore a smile, likely believing he was being considerate in doing so. The director's cruel intentions became evident. His plan was to ensure that the slave would lose every single one of his teeth. Afterward, he intended to have his men reinsert them, one by one. The deranged individual reveled in a sinister melody of removing and replacing. Masa experienced a gradual loss of his teeth. In front of them, they were forcefully pushed back once more, experiencing excruciating pain. The state of his mouth was in utter disarray, reflecting the chaos inflicted upon it. Relentless and unwavering, it showed no signs of halting its advance. He was undeniably confronted with the vilest individuals imaginable, those who found immense pleasure in witnessing the pain of others. The same melody persisted, bringing immense joy to the director, while Masa's horrifying screams painted a tragic contrast. After enduring yet another grueling session, the director pondered whether the slave had ultimately decided to reconsider his stance on the money. Masa's face settled amid the uneven terrain of his worn teeth. the young man found solace only in. The cherished recollections of his sister filled his mind. It was the freedom, the happiness, and the promise of a future that had kept him determined all this time. Indeed, his resolve remained strong, vowing to persevere no matter what, for Masa was ready to do whatever it took to escape this miserable island. Upon returning home, he found that his younger sister was facing health issues that necessitated surgical intervention. The surgery concluded successfully, yet it brought sorrow to his sister as she lamented over her brother's financial loss. Masa ensured that she remained oblivious to any concerns and informed her about his new employment opportunity. He resolved to work hard and earn a substantial amount for her benefit. Despite being at the darkest moment of his existence, enduring unimaginable agony inflicted by his captors, Masa remains resolute in his determination not to surrender. His sister's solitude is something he cannot bear. In this moment of reflection, it becomes undeniable that Masa has emerged as the narrator's most cherished character, even surpassing in their eyes. What an extraordinary individual he is. The director was beginning to approach his breaking point. He found it unbelievable that someone who was merely a slave could be standing their ground, displaying defiance despite the challenging circumstances they faced. Masa remained steadfast, refusing to alter his account of events. Found himself with empty pockets, the reality of his dwindling resources beginning to set in. Finally concluded that it would be wise to intervene. The initial action taken by the muscle-bound individual involved him directing a kick at his own teammates. The director was taken aback by the unexpected action of. The brute believed their current tactics were ineffective and decided it was time to change strategies. Before has the chance to inquire about his intentions, the scene unfolds. Seizes the trembling slave, who lets out a soft whimper. He acknowledged a sense of pride in Masa's determination. Despite his pride, he realized that this could be. In a burst of inspiration, he rapidly devises a move called the Haymaker 9000. The blow landed squarely in Masa's abdomen with precise force. The impact was so intense that it fractured his ribs into pieces. Blood erupted from the figure, a torrent accompanying yet another wave of indescribable agony. Masa struggled to regain his breath, his body bent low in exhaustion. The found herself once more captivated by the situation, musing that those who remained silent even after a severe thrashing were the ones she took the most pleasure in tormenting. The man stood in the midst of the action, seemingly relishing the moment as he systematically dismantled Masa's determination. With practiced ease, he prepared to deliver another powerful blow, a punch potent enough to break bones with each strike. The tormented slave reflected on his predicament, convinced that his blows inflicted greater agony than the relentless tooth extractions he had suffered throughout the day. Reveling in the satisfaction of landing a blow, himself to strike once more. Masa understood the severity of the situation. He realized that if the attack struck his head, his chances of survival would be slim. In his last moments, his mind drifted back to the cherished memories of his sister, whose deepest wish was simply for her brother to come back home safely. The punch aimed to claim a soul, landed squarely on Masa's body. Stood gazing at the scene before him, contemplating how all his troubles might cease if he simply began to speak. The relentless assault showed no signs of stopping, as unleashed a barrage of powerful blows from every direction, reducing his opponent to nothing more than a mere punching bag. Masa's torment intertwined with the cherished memory of his sister's face. With each punch he was sent sprawling, yet he stubbornly remained silent, refusing to speak. The director's usually calm demeanor began to falter as frustration bubbled to the surface. In a fit of anger, he demanded the slave disclose the whereabouts of the money without further delay. In spite of the hardships Masa had faced, he remained unwavering. He stood firm in his position, insisting there was no money. Truly, he was remarkable. Having reached the end of his endurance, granted the brute the freedom to take his life. With immense satisfaction, the young man prepares to throw a massive punch. As the scene transitioned, raced at top speed, determined to reach his friend's place swiftly. The concern was evident on his face, following the discussion he had with the deputy director. Upon stepping inside, he found himself, In that moment, there was an absence of anything. The scene revealed only a wretched man, his body battered and smeared with blood and bruises. A man struggled to draw each breath, yet somehow managed to whisper the name. Felt a wave of shock and dismay as he observed the poor state his friend was in. With a firm grip, the character restrained him, preventing any movement. Due to his background in the military, he has a complete grasp of the terrible state Masa is experiencing. In a concerning observation, it became evident that the young boy had suffered fractures to the majority of his lower ribs. His breathing was alarmingly fast, signaling a serious issue. The situation was further complicated by the potential risk of a rib puncturing one of his lungs. Masa's face showed signs of multiple injuries, with fractures around his nose and eye sockets. In addition, his skull was also badly damaged. His gums were pierced by agonizing stab wounds, and he had lost all his teeth. Observing Masa in such a dire condition, hope for his friend's survival seemed to be fading, much like the narrator's own despair at witnessing Masa's suffering. The boy observed the weak pulse and the severe injuries, which led him to ponder a single pressing question. He was eager to understand what kind of people could drive someone to such a state of torment. Masa, despite his condition, managed to piece together several sentences, feeling regretful for not heeding his advice. Ultimately, his suspicions were confirmed. They had been after his money all along. Yet, despite enduring such torment, he remained unyielding. With unwavering dedication, he had once safeguarded it, valuing it above all else. Yet now, that fierce resolve seemed to hold little significance. Due to his current circumstances, Masa finds no value in the money he possesses. Thus, he makes a noble choice to entrust the entirety of his funds to his friend. Due to personal convictions, he preferred not to have any obligations hanging over him. He was optimistic about his friend's recovery and wanted Masa to leverage this chance to aid himself. Masa's spirit seemed to have already come to terms with the harsh and unyielding truth. The young man lay in his friend's arms, his life slipping away with each passing moment. His survival seemed impossible. In his final moments, he knew that unless he entrusted the money to the one person he trusted above all others, his efforts would have been in vain. Masa disclosed the secret location where the money was kept. As they approached, there was a tree marked distinctively, and beside it lay their destination. The money lay hidden beneath the ground. Masa was acutely aware of the relentless effort required to amass such a sum through tireless work both day and night. The decision to place his trust in with this valuable amount carried significant meaning for him. In exchange, he requests that locate his sister after he leaves the island. The boy was taken aback when he heard someone mention a sister. Even in the afterlife, Masa found joy in reminiscing about the moments he spent with her, especially the time she altered her beloved skirt just to. She decided to reward her brother with a gift to acknowledge his dedication and hard work. It was nearly unfathomable to picture anyone smiling after enduring the torment that Masa had faced. However, he continues to feel happiness because he knows that will eventually find her and offer his assistance. Though the young man harbored hopes, he remained unsure of his prospects, feeling that the promise was something beyond his reach. Masa felt overwhelmed by fear and cried out in refusal. The person implored him earnestly, emphasizing the importance of looking after his beloved and only sister. Upon finally meeting her, Masa intended to convey a message on his behalf. Even in his last moments, her older brother held her memory close to his heart. As the words left their lips, Masa's form became suddenly slack. The character's spirit finally succumbed, leading him to an eternal rest. Despite having encountered this side character for only a handful of chapters, admiration for him surged to unexpected heights. Those who share this sentiment are encouraged to show their support. Felt the heavy weight of responsibility as he took on the task of giving his dear friend a fitting farewell. With his eyes gently shutting, he wrapped his arms around him in a warm embrace. In that moment, courage and silence intertwined seamlessly. Each tear that Masa shed held a memory of his sister, encapsulating a beautiful ending. Outside, carefully carries the lifeless form of his friend, determined to lay him to rest with the dignity he deserves. Someone stood nearby, observing the scene with keen interest. upon reaching the very tree that Masa had mentioned. Swiftly begins to excavate the area. After some time had passed, he stumbled upon a box hidden within. He carefully extracted the item, unveiling the diligently saved money belonging to his friend. Shifted his gaze toward Masa. The individual examined his own physique and felt confident, knowing he had successfully obtained the necessary amount. The cloth gifted by his sister was securely wrapped around his left arm. Swiftly untied the knot and resolved to cherish it as a final memento of his friend. He wrapped it around his face, transforming it into a makeshift mask. He expressed his gratitude to his friend for the assistance, just as everyone believed that things would finally settle. Out of the blue, and has made their sudden appearance. Masa's unexpected resilience in withstanding the torment until his demise left them astonished. In the end, he not only sacrificed his life but also his wealth, which they had now managed to uncover. In the mind of the disturbed director, this conclusion seemed appropriate for someone considered the lowest of the low. Fixes his gaze on the other person, offering no reply. Swiftly instructed the inconsequential slave to hand over the required sum. The young boy rises from his seat. The scumbag shot a glare so fierce it could be deemed the harshest side-eye anyone had ever witnessed. Stood firm, declining to disclose the amount. The director regarded him with disdain, viewing him merely as another gullible subordinate. He instructed his men to swiftly grab the money, confident that it would be as effortless as their previous attempt. 3 of them surged forward, convinced that their greater numbers would secure their victory. The numbers seemed useless when faced with the powerful opposition of the protagonist. In the panel, the character exuded an effortlessly cool demeanor. Delivered a powerful and vicious punch, forcefully expelling the air from his opponent's lungs. He continued his relentless assault, skillfully evading the initial strike and seamlessly executing a complete series of attacks against the second opponent as well. The last of the 3 fools attempts to catch him off guard with an unexpected punch. Unleashed a powerful uppercut, known as the Jawbreaker 9000, directly into his opponent's face. The trio of men was swiftly subdued, their strength seemingly reduced to that of mere children. After a long pause, the boy finally spoke up, revealing that his friend had trusted him with the money. The resources intended for the war would be redirected to serve his personal goals, and he was resolved to utterly destroy anyone who attempted to take them from him. The director believed that his team lacked effectiveness. A man, convinced that the solution to every conflict lies in firepower, chooses to introduce a firearm into a situation where others rely solely on their fists. Although it isn't specifically a he's wielding in this moment, the essence of his mindset is clear. Upon seeing the weapon, felt a surge of alarm. Despite his speed, he knew he couldn't simply punch a bullet out of its path. Due to the arrogance of the brute, intervenes. The character decided that expending a bullet on the situation was unjustifiable. The man appeared to be offering valuable guidance to the director, but in truth, his only desire was to resume their unfinished battle from before. He seemed eager to challenge at any given moment, as if he wished to share this person's location with. Remains unfazed. The director instructed to hasten the completion of their tasks. The 2 combatants positioned themselves, readying for battle. It was evident to any observer that the young fighter was at a disadvantage in terms of both size and strength. Fully aware of his surroundings, charges forward with the precision and intensity of a predator honing in on its prey. As the fight commenced, skillfully blocked and deflected the incoming attacks, managing to sustain only minor injuries. Through this brief interaction, he gained valuable understanding of combat techniques. The individual possessed the expertise of a seasoned boxer, taking a moment to acknowledge the impressive footwork demonstrated by their companion. Meanwhile, held the belief that evasion could only last for a limited time. What remained unknown to him was his extraordinary ability to instinctively dodge attacks endlessly. He executed the maneuver perfectly, landing a forceful punch on the man's liver. At first glance, it appeared the blow had caused significant harm. The tale masterfully illustrates the idea of size and strength. The individual showed no signs of emotion, remaining unaffected even after the attack. stood unfazed, his expression revealing only the faintest trace of discomfort, as if the heavy impact to his liver was nothing more than a light touch. The situation clearly indicated that would need to significantly improve his skills if he hoped to overcome his opponent. Swiftly delivered a powerful punch, leaving a noticeable impact. The force of his strike propelled the young man backward through the air. The impact was so severe that it required a moment for anyone to fully comprehend its intensity. Afterwards, it took only a moment to steady himself and hold his position. Considering Sob's observations, he believed that a cat had limited ability to evade a tiger. Regardless of the disparaging remarks, re-enters the ring and is met with a relentless flurry of punches. The director found himself amazed by the remarkable combination of power and speed in the young man's punches. The thought lingered that such strength might not suffice against a formidable adversary like. At that moment, prepared to unleash another mighty punch, prompting the young fighter to brace himself and block with both arms. The impact lands with a devastating force. Found himself lifted into the air once more. Once again, he found himself needing to steady his position. For this occasion alone, it would be different. The young boys stood precariously at the brink of the cliff. A fall from such a height would certainly result in a fatal outcome. Seethed with anger, convinced that mere evasion would be of little assistance to the captive. Relying on his remarkable battle intelligence, strategically anticipates the punch. The punch whizzed past him, narrowly missing its mark. Seizing the fleeting opportunity, he delivered a fierce hook to his opponent's face, the impact of which likely destroyed at least 20 brain cells. The force of the attack struck with a harsh impact, leaving him truly stunned. Though his body was resilient, the human head had its limits when it came to withstanding physical blows. His initial effective strike seemed to begin altering the course of the conflict. Felt a sense of delight in being the one who was finally experiencing the rare sensation of being pushed around. He perceived this confrontation as a genuine combat. Both individuals resumed their combat positions. They eagerly themselves for yet another round of lively conversation. He observed his opponent adopting a counter stance. This time, however, he was prepared for it. In the moment when he delivers a punch, the action came to a halt just inches from his face. Skillfully executed a maneuver known as a feint, using it to his advantage to set up his genuine assault, a powerful kick. From the director's viewpoint, the boy intently watched his actions, comparing him in his mind to a typical boxer. The situation was more intricate than it seemed. The brute had mastered the art of incorporating kicks into his sequence of attacks, adding layers of complexity to his fighting technique. Within mere moments, his instincts activated swiftly, prompting him to adjust his position just in time to intercept the powerful kick aimed at his head. Was left in shock for a full minute, completely taken aback by the effective defense. Seizing the opportunity, the boy launched himself forward, bringing his opponent to the ground with a swift tackle. The ground was seized, as found himself overwhelmed and overtaken. The director was left utterly astounded, feeling as if his very soul had been shaken. The usually outspoken brute found himself utterly speechless. From the start, seemed to have anticipated his opponent's plan to fake a move and follow it up with a kick. As effortlessly handled an opponent who was twice his size, he revealed his ability to discern the slight variations in the man's lower body stance. This insight told him that his opponent was also accustomed to using kicks in combat. With this piece of understanding, drove his elbow hard into his face, delivering a sharp, burning pain that lingered on his skin. The character seemed to have reached the end of his line. In preparation for concluding the fight, another elbow strike is, against all expectations, remarkably turns the situation to his advantage. The man manages to firmly grasp the young boy's neck. In that precarious stance, he found himself exceedingly susceptible. The muscular felt a twinge of regret, observing how nearly clinched victory in the battle. Yet he swiftly dismissed the thought, reminded that this wasn't a disciplined martial arts match bound by any rules. With those words, he forcefully hurled the young boy to the ground. The character began to apply pressure to his adversary's throat, cutting off his air supply. loudly proclaims that this clash is a true fight with no rules or limits. Found it increasingly difficult to catch his breath, realizing that his choices were severely limited. In the realm of entertainment, the director fully immersed himself. It was a novel experience for him to witness, unleash his full potential against someone in such a manner. Throughout history, numerous slaves had risen in rebellion, yet their efforts seldom led to success. Despite their expertise in martial arts, they ultimately fell victim to the devastating power wielded by. The individual in question was known for his underhanded tactics in combat, embodying the essence of a brawler and a literal street fighter. This self-perception led him to believe he surpassed regular martial artists, whom he considered significantly beneath his skill level. His past battles had equipped him with a confidence that now fueled his actions as he pinned to the ground, his grip unyielding around his throat. Fortunately for the young man, he adeptly executes the proper technique and delivers a precise palm strike aimed at its neck. In an attempt to maintain an advantageous position, he carefully places his leg in such a way that it prevents his adversary from securing a firm grip. He is beginning to understand that this is no ordinary martial artist he is confronting. The young fighter swiftly demonstrated his dominance by skillfully positioning his legs to trap's arm. With the same movement, shifted his momentum to his lower body, slamming to the ground and reclaiming his shot at winning. The brute found himself unable to comprehend the situation, as swiftly captured his arm, forcing him down and pinning him securely in place. Recognizing the situation they found themselves in, recalled his opponent's earlier remarks with a pointed reminder. The character pondered the idea that in a genuine fight, there were no rules, and anything was permissible. In order to illustrate his argument, the young boy shattered the object with a swift motion. His arm caused frustration. Losing an arm filled him with a torrent of excruciating agony, leaving him utterly subservient to. The young man positioned himself above his opponent, underlining that while might see this as a mere fight, it held deeper significance. He considered the fight to be even more insignificant than that. The rampage was the work of a single individual. The army had once recruited a man known for his unparalleled combat skills, George. In every encounter, his prowess in battle was so extraordinary that his engagements were far beyond what one might call a mere brawl. Remained unaware of the underlying truths, his curiosity was piqued solely by what a seemingly insignificant slave might contribute. Using an underhanded strategy, he decided to target's eyes with his fingers. In a bold move to counter the underhanded strategy used against him, thrust his head forward with all his might, colliding it directly against the pressure of the grasping fingers. Found himself enduring yet another agonizing ordeal as they shattered instantly. In his previous existence, his entire experience revolved around constant struggles for survival as a soldier. He had become a relentless warrior, driven by instinct without any limits to his deadly abilities. Even at that moment, he launched a powerful hammer-like thrust with his elbow, his intent clear as he aimed to smash his head. Fortunate for, he managed to dodge it just in time. The relentless force of the elbow showed no signs of hesitation, crashing into the ground with such power that it left a visible dent. The brawler could only wonder about the formidable opponent they faced. For an average person, the thought of ending a life would have caused a moment of hesitation. Despite his status as merely a slave, seemed to exhibit no trace of hesitation. For him, it was just an ordinary Tuesday. He neither showed any emotion nor concern, approaching the situation with an eerie calmness reminiscent of John Wick, as if it were merely another routine task. The moment of clarity dawned on, as he understood that he was facing an adversary who would not relent until his target lay dead. The brawler, despite his injuries, made a futile attempt to shield himself with his fractured arms. Noticed an opportunity, and skillfully took advantage of the gap left by his opponent. The attacker aimed for a sensitive spot on the man's neck. The searing pain intensified his suffering. The circumstances had entirely flipped from what they once were. Had his adversary pinned beneath him, his grip tightening as he began to choke the life out of his opponent. Meanwhile, swiftly came to the realization that he had severely underestimated. In his mind, it was undeniable that was a true force of destruction. The final thought that crosses his mind is interrupted when the young man delivers a powerful punch squarely to his face. The impact rendered him unconscious. The discussion turned to the fighting style of the boys for a moment. George, who was more commonly known as, had honed his skills in a highly effective martial arts discipline known as MAGA. Special forces from various countries commonly practice this martial art, which is frequently regarded as the most powerful in the world for close combat situations. The young man found that merely rendering someone unconscious did not satisfy his needs. He picked up a hefty rock from the ground, intending to smash it against his head. He focused intently, determined to shatter his opponent's skull. Confidently brings the stone down with a powerful swing, without the slightest pause. Just as the stone was about to meet his head, words began to echo in his mind. A young boy pleaded with a merciless weapon of destruction, imploring it not to take the path of a killer. Reflecting on that single instance, found himself reflecting deeply on his recent decisions, questioning the path he had taken. With a swift motion, he hurled the stone forward. The object drifted into the water. The battle had concluded, leaving unable to continue. The assumption seemed certain, but reality held a different truth. The persistent athlete, refusing to give up, rose to his feet once more just a minute later, ready to attempt the challenge again. The young man had already lost a significant number of teeth, yet he continued to chatter enthusiastically about how much he was enjoying the battle. His determination was evident, as he seemed eager to fight until the very end. Swiftly comes to the understanding that the second round is on the verge of beginning. Before either of them could react, the young man became aware of his presence behind him as he loaded his gun. Upon hearing the imminent threat, he swiftly maneuvered out of harm's way, successfully slipping out of the line of sight just in time. However, to his dismay, Bro found himself inadvertently absorbing the impact without any defense. Avoiding the confrontation led the young boy into a predicament, as he now found himself moving directly toward the sea. Amidst his concern about plunging into the water, he had little time to react. Stood outside, deep in thought, as he tried to make sense of everything. A bullet wound marred his chest, meanwhile. Successfully captured him. The character clung desperately to the cliff's edge, fighting to stay alive. The director stood outside, a wave of frustration washing over him as he realized he had missed his one opportunity to defeat the captive. Simultaneously, he felt no remorse for accidentally shooting. To him, the brother was merely a failure who couldn't complete a single task. The brute erupted in anger, hurling curses at the other for his unexpected act of betrayal. The unhinged director believed it was perfectly normal to discard his servants, once they had outlived their usefulness to him. In a last defiant gesture, rushed forward with determination, his brother, undeterred, advanced directly toward the man who had a gun trained on him. Found immense satisfaction in firing multiple shots at him. The speaker questioned the resilience of the individual, wondering what kind of extraordinary luck or protection he possessed that allowed him to keep running despite being shot multiple times. The director also appeared to share the same sentiment. The character found themselves bewildered, struggling to comprehend the bizarre events unfolding around them. In a final defiant gesture, unleashed a mighty Texas smash, directing all its force toward the director's unsightly visage. Understands that if he succumbs to this assault, he will no longer be able to face his own reflection. He initiated his, aiming precisely for a headshot on, effectively halting his fiery onslaught and concluding the battle. Felt a jolt of fear surge through him as the punch halted mere inches from his face, causing him to nearly lose control of his bladder. He simply found himself unable to endure the physical punishment it entailed. Lay devoid of life. The lifeless body collapses onto the ground. The director remained consumed by laughter, his demeanor bordering on the. He marked the occasion by treating his lifeless body as a target for his kicks. The person thought it was a relief to be rid of someone they considered a worthless troublemaker. They were serious about it, harboring such intense resentment toward the deceased that they couldn't resist continually showing their disdain. Bellowed with frustration at his fallen subordinates, urging them to rise and swiftly compile a report. He intended to accuse of stealing a gun in order to hold him responsible for his death. At last, he shifted his gaze. The focus shifted once more to the man who was accountable. From afar, fixed his gaze intently on the other person, evaluating the potential choices before him. The director praised him for reaching this point, commending his remarkable skill in combat. The ominous director conveyed to a sobering truth. No matter how hard an individual might strive, a solitary person could never emerge victorious in a conflict. Ultimately, it was the combination of armaments and tactics that decided the outcome of wars. In a sudden and unexpected gesture, flung his hands skyward. It appeared as though he was indicating his willingness to give up. Found himself unexpectedly delighted by the unexpected gesture. Even the mightiest warrior feels fear when faced with the barrel of a gun. Remained silent, holding his stance in a gesture of surrender. The director had no intention of sparing the man's life, considering how he had just squandered both his time and his valuable ammunition. With an air of arrogance, approached the man confidently. The observer noted that the slave had made an unwise decision by fleeing to the brink of a precipice. Eventually spoke up, expressing his belief that he had indeed made the correct decision. The director became aware of an unexpected noise and began to wonder about its source. The group recalled the drones they had encountered earlier, each nodding in silent agreement. The activation occurred as a direct result of endeavor to descend the cliff's steep edge. The director becomes acutely aware of the unfolding situation, a realization shared by everyone present. Before anyone from the director's team could grasp what was happening, the situation unfolded. Without hesitation, they were instantly killed. A young man stumbled and collapsed onto the ground. As stood there, it dawned on him that the drone was about to disrupt his world in a significant way. The expressions of despair etched on their faces were truly striking. In particular, it was daunting to face a machine that remained indifferent to one's identity once it had locked onto its targets. Two of the other men quickly darted away, heading in the opposite direction. The individuals hoped that their actions would secure their survival. However, the drone detected their movement and swiftly engaged in chase mode. The relentless pursuit would not cease until it fulfilled its sole purpose. His mind was momentarily consumed by thoughts of target elimination. He contemplated the relentless pursuer, infamous for seeking out any moving target and dispatching it without hesitation. Both of the guys experienced the same situation as they were. The individual was killed in a way that brought a sense of gratification. The director continued to point the gun directly at its head. The sight made them tremble almost uncontrollably. The young man realized that the scoundrel hadn't even flinched. His understanding of drones, particularly the mad pursuer model, is the reason behind this knowledge. Their situation reached a deadlock. Any attempt by one of them to escape would. The drone was set to completely destroy them. A drone flew back to carefully examine the surroundings as the director became lost in his own thoughts. He was baffled, unable to comprehend how a simple slave had managed to attract the drone to this location. Typically, the slaves inhabiting the island remained unaware of the drone's very presence. Remained indifferent to everything else, his sole focus fixated on eliminating the slave before him. This adversary had turned out to be far more perilous than had ever anticipated. Just as he was about to fire, resumed speaking, highlighting the director's awareness of the drone. With a serene demeanor, he also reminded the director that by pulling the trigger, it wouldn't be only who would meet his end. The drone would also make sure that would find himself riddled with holes. The director felt a surge of alarm at the young man's words, yet he remained convinced that the boy was merely putting on a show. The detection technology demonstrated remarkable intelligence. He believes that it lacks the intelligence needed to detect the activation of a trigger. Upon hearing the director's words, decided to change his tactic. He urged the director to go ahead and attempt to shoot him, confident that the truth of whether it was a bluff or not would become clear in that moment. Felt completely overwhelmed and unable to find a solution. As the confrontation continued, the young man boldly criticized his opponent. accusing him of being nothing more than a coward who resorted to throwing insults at others. The director was so intimidated by him that he dared not speak without silent permission. The notion that a subordinate was manipulating him infuriated him deeply. His rage burned inside him as he faced the individual he considered nothing more than garbage for uttering such audacious words. At that moment, he contemplated that if he were to pull the trigger, the drone would be incapable of detecting the slight shift in position it would take. As he stands there, an unsettling apprehension looms in his thoughts, concerned that the drone might respond during that narrow opportunity. The individual preferred not to risk his life under any circumstances. Had been engaging in a clever deception all along. He was uncertain whether the drone possessed the sensitivity to detect such subtle movements as pulling a trigger. With his actions, he managed to gain some extra time to endure the situation. The drone continued to hover for a short period, and once it believed its task was complete, it would head back to its original spot. Within the brief moment available, the young boy planned to charge forward with all his might, aiming to overpower the director. The situation was quickly taken over as he struck his head with force. A tense standoff had commenced, testing the endurance of both individuals. The drone lingered ominously above them, casting a shadow over their existence. As trembled at the thought of his uncertain prospects, his mind was consumed with doubt and apprehension. He found himself uncertain about the choice he needed to make. Apologies, I need a bit more context or content to help with a rewrite. Please provide the original script or dialogue you would like rewritten in third person. The wind surged powerfully upward, originating from the earth below. The wind swept through the forest, reaching the spot where both of them stood. The force of the breeze was strong enough to. The drone wobbled unsteadily, struggling to maintain its equilibrium. The director eagerly awaited the perfect moment to seize his chance and take action. The man wasted no time, and immediately began shooting at the enslaved person. This tale is not one where the main character possesses the ability to evade bullets at close range. However, due to notoriously poor aim, the most he managed was to slightly injure the young hero's shoulder. Due to his response to the bullets, the drone swiftly detects his movement. He became fixed in her sights as a target. The situation spelled trouble, and the young man was fully aware of it. Without pausing to consider, he dashed forward, driven purely by instinct. The drone unleashed a relentless shower of bullets aimed directly at him. The bullets missed their mark entirely. Made the decision to leap off the cliff. However, there was a significant issue with this choice. In midair, deftly executed a dodge, and as a result, a bullet pierced his thigh. The director found the scene to be quite entertaining. The concluding scene suggested a sense of failure. The young boy's form was seen plummeting from the edge of the cliff. The man found himself defenseless, struck by 2 bullets in rapid succession. As he descended rapidly through the air, executed a final daring move. While airborne, he adjusted his body's position. He managed to land gracefully in the sea, both feet touching the water simultaneously. There was a possibility that had ended up in the water. The persistent drone continued its relentless pursuit, refusing to come to a halt. The brothers, filled with vengeance, began firing relentlessly into the ocean below. Fortunately, none of the bullets managed to hit their intended target. The reality remained unchanged. Their son was gravely hurt. Seizing the opportunity to break free, he navigates further into the depths of the water. The drone was led to believe that it had successfully executed its assigned target. The drone, having spoken, moved back to its original spot. Stood in place, a gun gripped firmly in his hand. He knew better than to engage in a confrontation with the drone. He approached the edge of the cliff and discovered that the slave had met his end. The thought of triumph brings him amusement. In his moment of triumph, he basks in the splendor of his achievements. The character was laughing heartily, as if he had just watched a hilarious skit by Orr. The focus shifted back to the young protagonist. Rose from the depths of the water. Upon the startling realization, it became clear that both the drone and the director had disappeared. The immediate dangers he faced were now eradicated. The danger posed by his injuries takes precedence. His leg is severely wounded and bleeding into the water. Upon discovering that the bullet remained lodged within his leg, he swiftly employs the fabric from his mask to staunch the flow of blood. The subsequent action involved addressing the injury with swift medical attention. While blood seeped from his wounds, he swam with all the strength he could muster, gradually making his way toward the looming cliff. Unexpectedly, a sound reached his ears. A massive megalodon had surfaced, seemingly intent on claiming the man's life. The enormous shark was poised to tear him in two. Fortunately, he manages to escape his fate. He suddenly understood the situation. The memory of the blood came back to him. It had attracted the shark to this very spot. During this fleeting moment, realized the peril he truly faced. He wasn't simply confronting an ordinary shark. He was up against the ocean's ultimate predator. The existence of the movie, Jaws, can be attributed to the infamous great white shark. The creature possessed a powerful and agile form, designed for lethal efficiency and rapid movement. The shark, known for its bite force exceeding a pressure of 1 ton, was now on the hunt, attempting to make a meal out of the protagonist. Skillfully evaded the shark's attempt to make him its meal, deftly dodging once more. He questioned the purpose behind enhancing its speed when he could evade it with such ease. Despite his quick reflexes, he managed to steer clear of the bite. Even with its immense power, the shark's tail continued to strike him with astonishing force. The water enveloped him, stealing the air from his lungs. The shark, without hesitation, swiftly altered its course, aiming for another opportunity to launch an attack. Ascended to catch his breath. In that moment, he noticed a dim silhouette of the great white shark, rapidly enlarging as it approached. Realizing the imminent threat from beneath, he prepared himself for the attack. Took the lead and waded into the water. With a deliberate motion, he stretched his arms out horizontally. The boy began aura farming by assuming a T-pose, which proved to be an outstanding strategy on his part. In the ocean's depths, sharks typically preferred to surprise their prey with stealth. However, this time, the young man boldly displayed a confident T-pose, signaling that he was well aware of the fearsome predator with its menacing teeth lurking nearby. The character found it hard to believe that those words were coming from their own mouth. The man's maneuver left the shark momentarily dazed. Simultaneously, his injured leg, now bleeding, complicates matters for him further. The shark was being provoked to launch an attack. Upon the shark's detection of blood, his entire strategy collapses. At this moment, he finds himself exceptionally exposed to danger. The man, however, steadfastly stands his ground, unwilling to yield. He quickly pinpointed the crucial spots on the shark, understanding that his best opportunity lay in targeting the soft spot on its nose. The terrifying shark widened its jaw, preparing to unleash a devastating bite. The relentless determination of the human spirit drives it to continue battling fiercely. The focus was on this organ of the great white shark. Successfully landed a powerful punch right on the creature's nose. For a brief moment, he genuinely believes that his plan has succeeded. Regrettably, the explosion erupted right in front of him, and in that instant the shark lunged at him, slamming into his body with an overwhelming power. Emerged from the water, propelled by a sudden force. He came to the stark realization that he was completely outclassed by the disparity in their physical build. In an unexpected display of sheer determination, he faced off against a mighty great white shark, completely unarmed and nursing his own injuries. The situation seemed as if he were navigating life set on the most challenging mode, akin to the formidable difficulties found in Ring. Despite the exertion, managed to catch his breath once more. He was extremely anxious, fearing that the shark might still be lurking nearby, ready to attack. The moment approached swiftly, poised to exploit its lack of awareness, targeting his blind spot with precise intention. The enormous shark widened its mouth, preparing to swallow him whole. The wounded human narrowly avoided the creature's bite, which was fortunate. However, less fortunately, his shirt became ensnared in the beast's jaws. He found himself being pulled along with it. As the terrifying shark dragged him into the depths, conceded that the greatest human strength paled in comparison to the formidable power of a top ocean predator. Despite the valiant effort he made, the young boy eventually gave in to hopelessness as his body was tossed helplessly into the depths of the sea.